Hey there, everyone. I'm Logan.
And I'm Jen.
And this is Surprised by Marriage. Today, we're going into a topic that is not often talked about on our channel, but we are introducing it a little bit more today. We're talking about abstinence in your marriage. And you can't talk about abstinence without referring to that three-letter little word.
Sex.
Sex. Yeah. There you go. She beat me to it.
Yeah.
So,
with NFP Awareness Week coming up, we thought it was a good time to talk about abstinence in marriage, because that is what people hate about NFP, the fact that you have to abstain. And that's actually the beauty of NFP too, which we will get to later on. But we just want to talk about abstinence in marriage because we feel like people have this idea that once you are married, you can do whatever you want, have all the sex whenever you want. I know that's how we felt. We got married as virgins. We waited a long time, and we just thought there would never be a time where we wouldn't not have sex. If that makes sense. And that is not how life turned out at all.
When Jen got pregnant with our first son that we lost halfway through the pregnancy, her doctor was making us abstain for months after.
No, he said don't get pregnant for 6 months. But the problem is I wasn't aware that when I had gotten pregnant in the first place, and because I was still figuring all that out. Long story. We'll have to explain in another video. But basically, I got him to change it to 3 months because we were going to have to abstain for the entire time because we didn't want to risk me getting pregnant again.
So I'm thinking, okay, geez, oh my gosh, what am I going to do for 3 months? Oh no! So anyway.
And we were newlyweds. We had only been married like 7 months.
So once you get past 3 months, it was torture. That seemed like it would be the worst that we would have to do. Well, when we got pregnant with our oldest right now, we found out, based on complications, that she would have to get a cerclage, which basically sews her up, which makes sex impossible. Oh, no! So,
yeah. Well, first I was on bed rest, strict bed rest, because my cervix was opening, so that definitely meant no sex.
Right, so...
And then they stitched my cervix up, and that also meant no sex.
So for the remainder of that pregnancy, which would probably be like 6 months, plus, like... the extra months that they give you. I had a
C-section,
after,
so then after
that,
yeah.
We're looking at close to 10, 11 months.
No, well, I don't know, because I don't know. I think it's more like 9 months.
It probably felt like 10, 11 months.
It's more like anyway, 9 months.
That's our story, and every pregnancy since then, we have had to do the exact same thing.
So literally 9 months of no sex times 3. And that doesn't even include like the NFP abstaining, which sounds crazy. So it's been a lot of abstaining, which has been frustrating because like we said, we thought we would be able to have all the sex whenever we wanted. And that just didn't happen. There are a million reasons why you might have to abstain. And it could have nothing to do with NFP. Like in our situation, most of the times we have abstained has nothing to do with NFP, which is frustrating, but it's also forced us. I mean, it should force us, and it did force us to work on those other areas of intimacy. So there's this verse in 1 Corinthians 7:5. I'm going to read it. Do not refuse one another except perhaps by agreement for a season, that you may devote yourselves to prayer, but then come together again, lest Satan tempt you through lack of self-control. So first of all, that is proof that it is okay to not have sex for a while in your marriage, but at the same time, we need to not use that verse as an excuse to say, well, it says do not refuse one another.
For lack of self-control. But one would say that abstinence teaches you self-control.
Right. Speaking of self-control, Humanae Vitae talks about self-mastery, which is self-control. So I'm going to just read a little part of that. This is section 21. Moral family planning requires that spouses recognize and value the true goods of life in the family, and also that they acquire the habit of complete mastery of themselves and their desires. In order to control the drives of nature, the spouses need to become self-denying through using their reason and free will. Only then will the manifestations of love appropriate for married couples be what they ought to be. Self-mastery, or self-control, is especially necessary for those who practice periodic abstention. Having self-control in any area is hard. I would love to eat like a whole thing of Oreos, but that's not the best thing for me. And even though you can't really compare cookies and sex, because sex creates babies, it's still true.
They're both good.
I mean, they are both good. But still, you can't just have whatever you want whenever you want, even if it's a very good thing like sex. And if you're struggling about abstinence in marriage, I would recommend reading about Theology of the Body. And there's this great little book called Theology of the Body in 1 Hour. There was one quote in this book that really hit me when he was talking about abstinence, and sometimes you do have to abstain. And he says that the inability to be abstinent within marriage reveals a lack of love, which is kind of hard to hear a little bit, but it's true.
It validates our point on what we've learned throughout our marriage when abstaining.
St. John Paul II says in Love and Responsibility that the value of the person is higher than the values of sex. So even though sex is a very good thing, it's more important to love your spouse in the way that they need loving, and sometimes that means to not have sex.
Just to recap what we talked about and to bounce off the quotes that Jen just referenced, abstinence is a key part to your marriage. Whether forced or unforced, learning it can go a long way to loving your spouse in ways that you never imagined, and ways that are required to fulfill marriage and God's purpose for you.
And remember, sex is not everything in a marriage. Like we've been saying, it's a great time to work on those other areas of intimacy. Because if everything else is good, then your sex life will be good. So you have to work on those other things too.
If you're watching this video and learning about this topic heading into marriage as an engaged couple, now would be a good opportune time to practice understanding how to love each other without focusing on the value of I can have sex as much time as I want when I get married. And if you're watching this video and you may be married 10, 20, who knows how many years, and you just realize that something's missing in your marriage because one spouse is focused on sex the whole time and the other one would just like more out of the marriage, practicing that abstinence maybe for just that purpose of understanding each other more could go a long way.
It's a good idea. Yeah, and that verse from 1 Corinthians, take some time and pray together and all of that. We have, that reminds me, our priest told us this story one time of this infertile couple. They were wanting to have kids and it just wasn't happening. So he told them, and he says it was totally the Holy Spirit because he would not have thought of this himself, but he told them to abstain for 1 month and take that 1 month to pray. And so that's what they did, and then they got pregnant. I'm not saying like that's the magical thing to do if you are infertile, but it just proves the point that like no matter if you are open to all the babies in the world, abstinence can be used as a good in your marriage and can be fruitful in your marriage, no matter your circumstances.
Yes.
All right, those were some of our thoughts on abstinence in marriage. We just know how it has impacted our marriage, and our marriage has grown because of those times of abstinence, whether we liked it or not at the time. It has been fruitful, and so we just want the same for all of you.
So good luck out there, and I hope your marriage flourishes because of it.
Yep, and we will see you next time.